Welcome to the Deeper Into Movies podcast. My name is Stephen T. Hanley. I'm the founder and lead curator of Deeper Into Movies. We are a pop-up cinema based in London and New York. This is a special one for me. Today on the podcast, I am joined by my friend Joshua Eustis. Josh has been making amazing electronic music since the 90s. He plays under the name Telefon Tel Aviv, which I should note were a duo until his partner in music, Charlie Cooper, passed. And I've been a fanboy, obsessive of their music since their debut, Fahrenheit Fair Enough, in 2001. Josh and I met when I was interviewing him, and we've been friends ever since. Josh has also toured with Nine Inch Nails, and Josh produces, engineers, composes, masters. And I should note, in the pod, Josh kind of says that he thinks he's like an average musician and kind of, just gets by. This is ridiculous. Go listen to any Telefon track and you will hear otherwise. Josh is just super tough on himself, and I wanted to clear that up. This is also a special episode because Josh flew out and recorded with the Czech National Orchestra, and he had enough time at the end of his session to re-record the Deeper Into Movies podcast theme with a full orchestra, which is ridiculous. And that you just heard at the beginning, and it's just incredible. So here is me and my BFF, Joshua Eustis.
How you doing?
I'm good. Whereabouts in LA are you? I don't know if we've ever discussed this.
We're in the foothills of Pasadena.
Okay.
Kind of north towards Altadena and the foot of the mountains, right by all the hiking.
Okay. Is this your music room?
This is the tiniest music room in all of Los Angeles. It's essentially a closet. It's so small. But I have it tuned really carefully. Like I have the room EQ'd and everything's kind of dead because I like a very dead room. And, for mastering and mixing and production and that kind of stuff, it tends to work better for me if the room is dead. So it's dead. And the speakers are like, you can't see them. They're out of frame, but I can touch it with my hand. They're like right there.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like headphones.
Do you believe in like sacred rooms and spaces and stuff when they say studios have a magic?
I do to a degree. But part of it for me also is that studios usually are these like really awful, dark, sort of dimly lit, uninspiring, sanitized spaces. And I'm looking out a window at a fence that's covered in bougainvillea right now. So it's nice. I like a lot of daylight coming in. If there's natural light that can be had, I probably want it. I probably want to hear it, see it. So I don't feel like I'm just in this dark studio all the time. Studios, most of the ones that you have to work in, like if you're going to a proper studio, they don't really have windows. They're designed so that time passes in there and you're not really aware of the time.
Yeah, like Vegas
you're
casinos.
Not seeing the sun.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly like casino.
Yeah, I kind of believed in spaces, and then I remember Jim O'Rourke saying when everyone says, it says you record at the steam room, but now you're in Tokyo, do you fly back to the studio wherever it is to record in New York or whatever? And he says, no, I literally have a sign that says steam room that I just hang up in every place I go. That's it.
I love that thinking.
Everywhere is a steam room,
It's really funny.
But I love that everyone's got this kind of audiophile wire reader mythology of Jim O'Rourke's studio and all this shit he has, and he's like, no, it's just wherever I hang my hat, per se,
It was exactly the same for me from like the late 90s until maybe 4 years ago, beginning of the pandemic, when I moved here, because I was constantly on the move, and having to move my life from apartment to apartment or recording in different studios. So Benelli Sound Labs was just me working wherever I was working at the time, which was hundreds of places.
Right. Oh,
So
cool.
in that way, Jim and I are very much alike. I mean, or at least I think I like to think that I have a similar sort of like, I'm just going to work in the room that I'm in. And I also have this thing of like, if the room or the setting is too beautiful, I don't trust it. And I know that sounds weird because you feel like you want to set up your studio to be this inspiring place where you're going to have great ideas. But I'm not going to name this composer, but there's a composer, a really, really famous, well-known composer, hugely respected. He's written a ton of gorgeous music, and some other music, a lot of it being really sort of just sort of plain in a way. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that this guy has the most gorgeous studio setup to work in. And when you have such a beautiful setting, for me, it tends to sort of make things that are normally kind of banal sound more poignant or sound more heavy, or they become pregnant with the meaning of the place that you're recording in because you're inspired by this place. And I think it can tend to sort of mute your ideas a little bit, where you might be working on something that sounds amazing because of the setting that you're in. You're in this really beautiful, inspiring setting. And the result is that it doesn't hit at all anywhere near for the listeners as it did for you when you were writing it, because you're in this beautiful space. The counter to that, a sort of methodology that I am a really big fan of, is like the Mika Levy version, where like their desk is a disaster of empty candy wrappers and Coke cans lying on their side, and the keyboard sucks, and the computer is kind of shitty, and the listening environment is far from ideal. The speakers aren't in the right place. And my thinking is that I think part of why, at least for me personally, why Mika's music hits so hard is because they have worked out a way to make music hit in an environment like that. So my suspicion, because I don't know Mika, just know their work. My suspicion is that in working in a really kind of weird, sort of not great environment, sort of kind of messy, and it's a little bit disheveled and not ideal, that if something is working in there and it hits in there, and as they're writing, they probably feel this piece of music, it translates better to the real world. I don't know if that makes sense. It seems sort of counterintuitive, but I think working in kind of a shitty room is going to yield better results most of the time, because if it's working in a shitty room, it's going to work incredibly anywhere else. When somebody's staring off into the sunset listening to Mika Levy, it's going to sound incredible, right? Yeah. It's just going to hit really hard, you know?
Well, that's like when I see an amazing music video and then I'll like listen to the MP3 and I'm like, well, or in my early days, the CD single, I'd seek out and get it. And I'm like, this kind of sucks about the video. In the same way, I think you were saying about the space being so stunning and glamorous and giving it something that isn't so much there just solely on the audio. It's kind of like, that was an amazing music video, but without the track, the song's kind of forgettable.
It's common.
Yeah. Or like when I was thinking about, there was that funny video of David Guetta when he heard Daft Punk and he was like, these guys are the fucking future. I need to go and meet them. And he went to their studio and it was like, there's no fucking way around the world was recorded on this piece of shit keyboard through this like Behringer amp and things like that. And he was like, these guys are just incredible. If they can produce something that incredible and that rich on this piece of shit equipment, then, he's basically saying that he's doomed. He's like, I've got my fancy studio and I've got my fancy everything. And these guys are just running laps around me with this
burial methodology.
Yeah, literally.
Burial notorious for using just whatever's lying around. There's there's apocryphal stories that Burial made all of, untrue in SoundForge or whatever. I don't know if that's true. I doubt it.
Yeah.
I'm sure SoundForge got used a lot. I mean, I don't doubt that. But I think part of why, Burial's music hits hard, I think, is because he's not so worried about the setting that he's making it in. He's more worried about, is it going to hit everywhere?
Yeah.
Is it going to hit in any setting? So, proof's in the pudding for me. I mean,
yeah, however it works, it works. I know, because people were saying, like, do you have a podcast studio or whatever? And I'm like, no, I just like using my living room coffee. Similar to you said, I have the garden right next to me to the left here. So I think I'm just much more comfortable in I know, but it also is kind of more like a conversation in the living room, just like with a friend sitting opposite you, than it is in a kind of gross podcast studio, with
these sort of sanitized, sort of hyper clean spaces tend to be a little bit, well, I don't know, when the setting's too clinical.
Yeah, I think that will lead into the chat, or will feel too, we're on air kind of vibe, and it is just recording in the living room. So, what kind of teenager were you? What was your first listening experiences that really hit, and what movies you were into?
Okay, well, the listening experiences that hit started really early for me, luckily. My parents are really into music, kind of a big part of just the backdrop of their lives or whatever. And the first memory I hear would have been in the late 70s, and it was my father listening to Hot Buttered Soul by Isaac Hayes, and I just couldn't believe how magical it sounded to me. I mean, arrangements back then, of course, were extremely lush and detailed, full horn section, full string section, the band itself was just incredible. And then the music was this, like, I think we were listening to Walk On By, which of course, the Burt Bacharach song, was made famous by Dionne Warwick, and she did a kind of simpler pop version. It was more direct to Burt's version, but Isaac Hayes did this long, slow, extremely dark, almost dour, brooding version of it with these like fuzz guitars in it and a choir singing. And it sounded so grand to me and so gigantic that it instilled in me. Of course, I wasn't aware at the time. I was barely able to walk, but it instilled in me this sort of curiosity of of music production without realizing that it was music production, but like how to get a song to be this gigantic world, where it wasn't just a piano and a voice, which of course I love that, but it was piano, voice, horns, choir, fuzz guitar, incredible sounding bass guitar, drums, huge string section. It just sounded huge. And so ever since then, since I was a little boy, I guess I've been kind of obsessed with that. And then I guess a little later, I guess by the time I was 7 or 8, I saw the video for Rocket by Herbie Hancock and like how futuristic it was. This incredible electronic piece of music was really far ahead of its time. Had this guy doing record scratching in it, which was a totally new thing at the time, and nobody knew what the hell that was. And so that sounded futuristic. And then he's playing on a Rhodes Chroma, this crazy melody, and these robot legs are walking around. And that showed me sort of a vision of like where music should or could go. And so then that became then my obsession with electronic music, which took over my whole life. And then, by the time I was a teenager, I discovered Skinny Puppy and Einsturzen and Neubauten, and like those things sort of reshaped my brain. Because when you hear that when you're 13 years old, your neural pathways are still getting aligned for like what is good and what is cool and what you like and what is normal. And so that stuff started to sound very normal to me, whereas like kind of, the music that people were more familiar with sounded sort of strange and alien to me. And then that, but that's teenage years. And then by the time I graduated high school, I discovered Autechre. I think they put Amber out my senior year in high school. And then Aphex Twin, and then Goldie, all 94 to 96 was like crazy. That's when I was fully realizing that I had to make electronic music. I went to school to study music in New Orleans, and that was a classical training. So I was doing a lot of conducting and a lot of orchestrating and theory and this kind of stuff, and which I also loved. And then, so by the late 90s, by the time I was graduating college, I knew that like my goal in life was going to be to do sort of, large format orchestral or chamber music, and then sort of marrying it with electronics somehow. I don't know if that was, in the beginning, it was more like, oh, let me add sound design to this stuff to make it kind of interesting or weird or otherworldly. And as I get older now, I'm thinking more about ways to take an orchestra and sort of transfigure it, to have it, not to deconstruct it, but to have the orchestra be more than the orchestra. Now, okay. I didn't do that on the Deeper Into Movies theme. I mean, we talk about what the sort of sound for this podcast is, and sort of your vision for it, and how it needs to kind of connote a sort of classic movie magic. So I didn't want to get too weird with it, and I kept it pretty straight. But it's still all of the stuff that I wrote for the podcast is sort of rooted in my kind of obsession with just film score in general. But it goes back, when I got older, it goes back to stuff, from the 50s and 60s, and how, Bernard Herrmann was doing stuff, and then later Georges Delerue, and French New Wave kind of stuff versus Hitchcock kind of weirdo orchestration, and how that stuff now to me, and then later John Williams in Star Wars, which was like completely insane to me as a kid, made me fall in love with the sound of movies, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Let's go back on a few of those. How are you discovering stuff like Skinny Puppy and I guess Ministry and those type of guys? Did you have a cool older brother or a record store guy? Because obviously for the kids, this is pre-internet era where things were harder to find. And
okay, I did have an older brother and an older sister that were very keyed into music. And then as a result, my mom was involved in all that too.
Right.
My mom was like a big music nerd. But this all kind of hinges around slightly goth stuff. You know, my brother, I remember when I was a little boy and my brother was like, I don't know, I was maybe 7 and he was maybe 12. I remember I always was obsessed with the idea of whatever he was listening to, because he had his door closed.
Yeah.
And he was listening to music pretty loud. And it always felt like this hollowed inner sanctum of cool music.
Yeah.
That if I could just get access to what was going on in there, it would somehow unlock the secrets of music to me. And so I heard him playing one day Joy Division, and then the Cure, and then, specifically Head on the Door, I think he was listening to at the time. And he was listening to, old Joy Division stuff and then New Order stuff. And then also I remember when Daydream Nation came out, he got the LP for that and was listening to it. And it was like the weirdest shit I'd ever heard in my life. And he would go to football practice and I would sneak into his room and just look through his records and listen to his records. And I mean, at the time he would have killed me for doing that. But I know, like, if he hears this podcast, he's, I'm sure, well aware that I would rifle through his records constantly, and that it informed so much of what I listen to now and so much of how I feel about things. I basically got obsessed with all of the bands that he got obsessed with. And then I would go to the record store, and there was this, like, older goth chick that worked there, and she was always kind of turning me on to new stuff. And that's how I discovered Skinny Puppy and Neubauten and, all the other Fetus or Throbbing Gristle, Cabaret Voltaire, all this other kind of stuff that was like, people thought I was literally insane for listening to this. And I thought maybe I had kind of lost my marbles a little bit because this music was so weird to me as a teenager. But it shaped the way I hear everything now. And so I have my brother to owe for a lot of that. And then my older sister was like certainly at the time, a just dyed in the wool goth. And so her and her boyfriend would like sit around, that door closed, and I would hear Cocteau Twins, Chameleons, Sisters of Mercy, this kind of stuff. And that's how, I guess by 1990, I was obsessed with Cocteau Twins. And then my mother got into all that stuff because she would hear it and go, well, what's that? That's beautiful. I love it. So when I was a kid, like in the car with my mom, she's playing Bluebell Knoll.
Right. Wow.
You know, so I had this like, I really lucked out in terms of having an older brother and an older sister that were really musically curious and were also not as concerned with, you know, what was popular, but they had very specific tastes and curiosities about kind of other music. And then my mother got into all of it. I'll never forget the day I must have been, I was in high school. I don't remember what year it was, but I came home and my mother was listening to this music with this girl singing on it. And I'd never heard anything like it. And I was like, what the hell is this? This is incredible. And she's like, oh, it's Portishead.
Right.
Have you ever heard Portishead? And I'm like, well, no. I don't know what Portishead. She's like, well, they're from Bristol. They're a British band. Isn't this cool? I remember thinking like, yeah, it's deeply fucking cool.
This episode is brought to you by our friends at Mubi. Mubi is a creator streaming platform dedicated to bringing you the best in cinema. I've been a Mubi subscriber for years, and today I'm going to go through some of my favorite titles on the Mubi UK platform and give you some recommendations. Okay, number one, I can't recommend this documentary enough. John Galliano, High and Low. Just an incredible portrait of a genius fashion designer. And I don't know why, this got me really emotional. There was a moment where he was talking about when he saw Abel Gance's 1927 film Napoleon and the effect it had on him. And it was just a beautiful moment of someone being completely struck and obsessed with a moment in cinema that pretty much affected his entire career, and so much he kept on coming back to that as a source of inspiration, and I found that was really beautiful. So hands down, that's my number one recommendation to go and watch. Okay, another one that really haunted me, Personal Shopper from 2016. I went into this because it was recommended by my pal Brayson Ellis, and I usually always love his recommendations. And again, I found this film really moving and haunting and spooky. And I'm telling you, there's about a 15-minute scene in this movie which is just text messages. And it is so stressful and spooky, but it's a great feat in cinema just to have a scene of texts being so intense and compelling. The WhatsApp group chat could never. That's my number two. And three, I'm gonna go for Surge, starring Ben Whishaw, directed by Anil Kara. And I love this movie. They kind of pitched it as good time on the streets of Peckham in London. And again, oh my God, I sound like a broken record. Special connection to this movie because when the pandemic was kind of easing up and we could do screenings again, we screened Surge, and Anil came out to do a Q&A with us, and we really needed all the support we could have at that time when we were getting back on our feet after COVID. You know, we were wondering, will anyone come back to movies? Is cinema dead? So those are 3 bangers for you this month. And here's the good bit. You can watch all these movies and more for free. Just go to mubi.com/deeper into movies for 30 days of amazing cinema for free. That's mubi.com/deeper into movies. And how are you discovering like Aphex Twin and Orteca and stuff? Were they big stateside, or were they kind of a niche?
It was niche, but we had a Tower Records in downtown New Orleans, and there was this guy there who was the buyer, or one of the buyers, and he had his finger on the pulse of everything going on in the UK at the time, and electronic music more broadly. And so the Tower Records in New Orleans was like a great place to go shopping for weirdo electronic music, because this guy just knew all of it. And I mean, I remember there was like a listening station, and it said ambient. I was like, okay, I don't know what that means, but it looks fucking cool. These record covers look cool. And it had like Selected Ambient Works Volume 2, Amber, some other things. I don't remember. Maybe a Black Dog record, maybe a B12 record. I don't remember what else was on there. So it was like some ambient stuff, and then some stuff that we just kind of generally consider early warp.
Yeah.
And man, I don't know if I ever recovered from hearing all that stuff. I went crazy. And then, you know, that guy was there for years. And so, I mean, I remember in 1996, I went in there and I was looking for something. He was like, oh, I remember you bought Trirepete. You like that? You're going to love this shit. And he put in my hand the first Scam EP from Boards of Canada, the High Scores EP.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, what's this? He's like, don't even fucking ask. Just go home and put it on. Please trust me. And so I did, and I went home and immediately was like, oh shit, these guys, what is this? Like, this is amazing. Because it was like the first time, you know, I'd experienced something hauntological.
Yes.
I'd experienced something that was like taking something from the past and kind of repackaging it in this really sort of not as much of a like blatantly nostalgia play, because there's all this kind of futurism baked into it, the way the beats were programmed and the production. But it really connoted 70s to me as a 90s kid at the time. And it freaked me out in a way where I couldn't stop listening to it. I couldn't get away from it. Been obsessed ever since.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
All those weird like Sesame Street samples and stuff, and all like the counting. Well, kind of, I'm thinking more on Music is Right to Children, but yeah, that was like, it hit really hard for me being in the UK. All those weird infomercials and stuff, and all those like, I don't know if you ever, if they've ever hit on the States, they kind of went viral over here when they had this really evil, dark, like, don't go on the railway tracks, don't touch your power line, and all of them ends with a kid dying. All of them end, or like, be careful with fireworks.
Some kid getting pancaked, yeah.
Yeah, but with that real horrible, weird, gritty kind of like Mike Lee realism, and they all end with like, Danny, no! And you hear like the front, like,
the train, ding, 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 ding,
yeah,
ding,
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, we had, of course, you know, in the 80s in America, shall we say that there was a certain baseline level of paranoia that undergirded all of American society pretty much across the political board. So the VCR would get rolled into class with the big TV on the cart, and some tape would go in there, and it would always have this goofy kind of procedural synth music in it. And it was always a warning about smoking marijuana and how it was addictive and how you were going to die of marijuana addiction or something stupid like that. A lot of like dare propaganda, you know, dare to keep kids off drugs. That was a big deal during the Reagan administration when I was a kid. And we all thought it was kind of funny, you know, but it plants this aesthetic seed in your mind about the ways those things are. And then to hear kind of BOC sort of, you know, Boards of Canada kind of recontextualize that stuff was really cool. It was like, I don't know, it was like, it's like reclaimed wood or something. It was like making use of the ruins of something that should have died and gone away forever. And they were sort of playing around in the structures of a church after it had been burnt out. I love it for that reason.
What instruments were you playing by the time of Aphex or Tekra? What were you fooling around with?
I was in a kind of, you know, sort of body music band when I was in high school. You know, sort of industrial stuff. I had like a Corgam 1 and a Juno 106 and a Brother PDC 100 sequencer and a Yamaha SY85. And we tried to like make, these are sort of like workstation things that, you know, You probably wouldn't really want to use that stuff now, but people keep them around for laughs or for the organ sample in the M1 or the piano sample. And I was trying to do kind of industrial music because I was so influenced by Skinny Puppy and Frontline Assembly and Front 242 and all that stuff. And then by the time I had gotten over to sort of openly British and openly weird electronic music like Aphex Twin, Autechre, that stuff, I had been a guitar player for a long time since I was a kid, just kind of self-taught and kind of tinkering around. And then I started taking classical guitar lessons in high school. And that's ultimately what I went to college as my instrument. If you were going to music school where I went in Loyola, you had to have an instrument. And so my instrument was classical guitar. But as soon as I got there, I realized I wanted to study composition and theory, like within a month of starting college. And my advisor was like, okay, I get it. Like, you're a good guitar player and you could make a career out of this, but I don't think this is for you. You should be writing. You should be writing music, and like you should be studying theory and this kind of stuff. So, I've always barely gotten around on a piano. I play it very badly, but well enough. Guitar is probably my primary instrument. I'm still not a great guitar player. I was at the time. I'm certainly not anymore. And then as you start making music on your own, like I was doing in the 90s, I had to kind of play everything and I had to sort of engineer everything, and I didn't know how to do any of this stuff. So you just kind of plunk around on stuff until you sort of figure it out. So I'm not really great at any instrument, but I think by the end of the 90s, I could play bass passably well. I could play guitar passably well, keyboards passably well. Drums, not at all. Like abysmally bad at drums. And that was pretty much it.
And when did you get a laptop or a PC and start sequencing and programming?
1995.
Right. Oh, wow.
I started programming in 1995 on a 520C Apple laptop. And I had a crack of Studio Vision, and
I'm gonna look that.
You could program.
Was this before like the G4 and stuff? Must be.
Oh, yeah. This is 1995. So G3s weren't even a thing yet.
Right.
G3s weren't a thing until maybe 99, I want to say.
Oh, shit. These are really... I just Googled it. I wanted to see what it was there.
Yeah, 520C was my first laptop, and I got cracks of Studio Vision Pro, and then shortly thereafter, I worked summers and saved up and bought the cheapest Pro Tools rig I could buy, and a little Mac tower that I could connect it to, and I don't know, maybe that was 97. I had done some commercial work in a studio in New Orleans and was introduced to Pro Tools in 1995. And I had to learn how to edit audio for this job. I'd never done it before. Very few people had actually done it at this time because it was such a new technology. Pro Tools had just become Pro Tools. It used to be called Sound Tools, and it had just turned over to Pro Tools. It was version 3.5. And I had to edit these drum recordings. And I had no idea what I was doing. It sounded awful. But I was like, I can make really crazy music this way. This is a really great way to manipulate audio and cut things up and make things really strange. And so that would have been, from 1995 to 1997. And then by 97, 98, I started seeing Charlie around the scene again. And we started talking about working on music. And that's when, late 98 basically is when we formed Telefon Tel Aviv and started working on music together.
How did that name come about?
Totally by accident. It just popped into my head one day and we wrote it down and we were like, okay, that's the name of the band. It had no meaning or anything. Because the meaning behind it was that I had one of those old telephones in my room. I didn't have a cell phone. This was 1997 or 98 or whatever. And I had this we call it a blower. You know what I mean? It has a real bell in it. When it rings, it's loud and jarring. And then I looked at it, and then that name popped into my head, and then that was it, as they say.
Didn't you have a phone as your, logo?
Yeah, our friend Brett had made us, a goofy little logo that was, modeled after the telephone in my room. It was modeled after, a really old-fashioned, kind of funny telephone. That logo lasted a couple years. We never really considered whether it was an official logo or not. I guess we didn't think. He just was like helping us do artwork, and he dropped that in, and we were like, that's funny.
Yeah, because you had a logo on your website around the...
Yeah, Brett did the websites, all those like cool flash animations.
Yeah, this is how sad I was. I like to go on your website and just listen to the drone you had playing on your website.
It was pretty cool.
Around second album.
Map, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, whenever you clicked through the navigation, it would start another loop, and it would make a layer into a full piece of music. So if you clicked through all of the navigational items there, if you click through news or shows or, music or whatever, discography, one would layer a cello, one would layer this weird synth thing, another thing the Rhodes loop was just kind of swelling in the background of all of this, and then it kind of was supposed to make a piece of music out of it. If I say so myself, it was pretty cool at the time.
I thought it was cool. I mean, yeah, I just put it on as background music, and
yeah, supposed to give you a bit of a vibe while you're reading news about us that doesn't matter and that no one cares about.
So how long till you have your Fahrenheit album?
So Charlie and I started working in earnest in 1999, and then we got like a demo of stuff together that's now released as Archive 99. So you can hear all the early demo stuff that got us signed to Hefty. And so there was that piece, and then there was my graduation piece at university, which was a piece I wrote for Octet and Electronics in like late 98, early 99. That went on the demo as well, but that's still not released. I never released it. I probably should. So that would have been late 99, early 2000. And then Charlie and I started working on Fahrenheit like immediately at that point. John Hughes called us and was like, I want to do a record with you guys. And so we were like, oh, okay. And then we did it for a year. We worked on it from like maybe February 2000 till we finished. We printed the last song, which was TTV was the last song we finished for that record. And we printed it on Christmas Eve 2000. It took all year. And we worked every day. It took all year to do it.
And did you have a budget? How were you supporting yourself in this?
Oh, man, we had day jobs. Charlie was a waiter and I was a bartender. And, we would do that. And we'd go to work, go out, get wasted, come back and work at like 6 a.m. till, drunk. And then like sleep all day and then wake up again. If we were off, we would correct our work that we did when we were kind of like not sober or whatever. We weren't really supporting ourselves. I mean, I was living with my parents. He was living with his parents.
Right.
The studio was at my house. And it was pretty cool because my mom and dad thought it was like really cool that we were doing this. They were like into it.
Sick.
And so my mom would like make dinner and like she'd come up and like knock on the studio like, you guys hungry? I did a roast chicken. We're like, oh, sick.
Yeah.
It was great. I really did hit the jackpot in terms of parents that they were so supportive of this. We didn't have a lot of money. I think Hefty gave us like a couple grand to keep us afloat at one point. Which at that point we could make that. I could make $1,000 last for months. Yeah. At that point. Like a really long time. And then we had done the Nine Inch Nails remixes around the same time.
Fragile era.
And
Fragile era?
Fragile era. So we were on the Things Falling Apart release.
Right.
And so we were working on Fahrenheit.
How did you get on their radar?
Through Danny Lohner and Alan Yeager. So Alan Yeager is a New Orleanian guy who's like a screen printing artist. And he's in that world, he's pretty legendary because he's been around since the early 90s. And whenever cool bands or whatever would come to town, he would do these like hand-drawn, really ornate, custom screen printed show posters. Mm-hmm. And so he met Nine Inch Nails that way because he did a show poster for them. And, I think the band thought it was cool or whatever. And they kind of became friends. And he became friends with Danny Lohner. And Alan I had known already for years by that point. And he gave the demo to Danny, and Danny loved it. And then that went from there. Funny enough, that was in early 2000. But I had already met Trent and Danny when I was 18 because in 1995 or whatever, or maybe it was late 94, early 95, I was at my senior prom, and the prom sucked. So me and my homies and our girls, we all left, and we went downtown to the only bar that would let us hang out, because the drinking age was 18 at the time. But this bar would let us hang out if we were quiet. And so we were behaving ourselves, and it was fine. And the only other people in the bar were Trent and Robin Fink and some guy who was just punishing the living fuck out of them. Like, this guy was not leaving them alone. Mm-hmm. And my friends were like, "Oh my God, look, it's Trent Reznor. Are you going to go talk to him?" It's like, man, I'm not going to go talk to this guy. Like, no, dude, he wants to talk to a kid. No.
Yeah.
I'm going to leave him alone. He looks like he wants to be left alone. And then like a half hour later, it turns out like Trent's trying to get my attention. He's looking at me like, he's giving me a look of like, holy shit, dude, help.
Right.
And so I like waved at him. I held up like 2 fingers. I was like, 2 minutes, go to the front. And so I pulled my car up in front of the bar. And then he and Robin Fink like came running out of the front door and like dove into my car. And they're like, "Go, get us the fuck out of here. Like, go, go, go." And so I got him out of there, and we went to this place called Verdi Mart, which was like an all-night po' boy shop. And we just like kind of sat around eating po' boys and just kind of talking shit for like a while. They were really cool to me. I was a kid.
Did your friends come with you, or did you just...
No, I left my friends behind. My friends were like, "Oh, get the fuck out of here," you know.
Crazy.
I left my date, everything.
What?
Anyway, it was really, she didn't care. She was like, "Go, like, it's cool. I'll hang out with these guys. It's cool. I'll catch you later." And then Trent was like, "Hey, come by the studio sometime, you know, like, let me give you the tour."
Yeah. What era
so he
is
gave
it?
me the
Is
tour.
Is this like
1995.
Hate Machine, or is this Hate Machine or like Downward Spiral?
No, this was just after Downward Spiral.
Right.
So he was
Fuck.
really up. He was really up at this point.
Right.
And I loved that record. I mean, I still love that record. That record's incredible.
Yeah.
It's so fucked up and so weird, and the production's crazy, and the songwriting's, you know, timeless. He gave me the tour of the studio the next day, and we kind of kept in touch a little bit, you know?
What's the age difference between you guys? Just out of curiosity.
Trent is, I think, 12 or 13 years older than I am.
Right. So you're like 8.
I'm 18. He must have been 30.
Crazy. So cool. Yeah. Well, that's huge at that time.
Yeah,
that difference.
it was really big. It was a big deal for me how cool they were to me also, because they would invite me to like secret shows and stuff. They did a secret show at House of Blues, and Robin Fink would call me at the record store I worked at and be like, "Hey, we're doing a secret show. I've got you on the list." So I was like a kid getting like VIP at Nine Inch Nails shows, and they
That's
would all
nuts.
say hi to me. And my friends were all just like in awe that like these guys were being nice to me. So it was really funny in 2000 when Danny brought the demo to Trent, and Trent heard it and was like, "Oh, this is super cool. Get these guys in here. Who are they?" And when I walked in and Trent looked at me, Trent was like, "No way, dude. It's you? Fuck, man. That's cool. Like, fucking A, here's Studio B. Like, let us know what you need. Like, you can work here as long as you want.
Fuck.
You know, take all the time you want." So it was this really cool kind of like full circle situation with Trent.
And that's so cool. That was a blind listen as well. That wasn't like, "Oh, Josh, got my break."
No, it was a blind listen, because he wouldn't have put 2 and 2 together.
Yeah.
But it meant a lot to have that much like support from him early on, you know. Or he would like come in the studio being like, "Fuck yeah, man, y'all are killing it. This shit sounds sick. Like, what are you doing? This is awesome. How are you doing this? Like, what the hell is that?" Like, we didn't know what the fuck we were doing. You know, we were just messing around in Pro Tools, like trying to make weird electronic music. We weren't putting a ton of thought, or, you know, there wasn't some grand vision for it. It was just like, okay, how fucked up can we make this music? Like, what's the weirdest stuff that we could do and have it still be listenable? Anyway, it was very cool. And I would say also totally like gave us a big jump start having that much support from him early on.
You mentioned John Hughes, and this is John Hughes the third?
The third.
Correct. Who's in Slicker. Is he Slicker?
Yeah, he's Slicker. So he was doing a project in late 90s, early aughts called Slicker that we thought was just insane. Like, it was the work of an insane person in the best way possible. And he had a record label called Hefty Records that we thought was just beyond cool. He had like Scott Heron doing early Savath and Savalas stuff there. Richard Devine was doing stuff there, but then all these like cool kind of Midwestern sort of math rock bands. And we sent the demo to him, and he called us back that day and was like, "This rips. I want you to come to Chicago. Let's work on music together."
That's crazy.
I still talk to the guy every couple of days. I mean, like, we're 25 years later, we're still friends.
That's so cool. Because John Hughes had a label too, right? He signed Red House Painters, I think.
Oh, I don't know about that. I couldn't speak to that. The older John, the late John Hughes.
I know there's a crazy story of when Mark Kozlek, I think.
Are you thinking of Cameron Crowe? Maybe because Cameron Crowe had a relationship with Mark Kozlek.
No, both. Yes to both. Maybe it was.
I don't know if Big John. We call him Big John.
Right.
There was Big John and Little
Big John.
Big John. I don't know if he had a label.
Kozlek definitely rang John Hughes. I think he was a fan of the band, but I know he had to hit him up for some money to finish Songs for a Blue Guitar. And he I think they may be in mutual admiration, but I know he said he had the longest phone call ever with John Hughes, and he spoke to him for about 6 hours. And then at the end said, I kind of need X amount of money to cover this record. And he cut him a check.
I would believe that.
Because I think his label was fucking him or something. But then I know, also not to portray Mark Kozlek as a fuck up, but I know he had a huge, I think his agent or his manager fucked him on tax, and Cameron Crowe then bailed him out doing Almost Famous, which completely got him in the green again with the money he got from acting in Almost Famous. So
yeah, I think I can say this. I mean, I knew Big John really well and was at the house all the time. He was like my second father, really. And he had a music room that was big. I mean, it was gigantic. And I'm not exaggerating when I say there were tens of thousands of records and CDs in there. I mean, everything you could ever imagine. And he knew where everything was. Mm-hmm. I don't know how he had it organized, but he had like an encyclopedic, sort of inexhaustible knowledge of and curiosity in music in general. Mm-hmm. And
well, he would completely bake in the tracks to the screenplays, wouldn't he? He'd have it all
a lot of times.
Out.
Yeah, I think if you go back and look through those, you'll probably see, like, I mean, also, you know, bands like OMD and stuff who are, you know, to me, just impossibly cool.
Yeah.
A lot of those bands really got their breaks in John Hughes movies.
Yeah. I don't think we can overstate how...
Thompson Twins, they blew up after being in The Breakfast Club.
Yeah, I think the Pretty in Pink soundtrack is still... Well, that's my favorite John Hughes related movie. Obviously, he wrote and directed.
It's a big one.
That's the one. That's the absolute... And that soundtrack's fucking ridiculous. That's so great.
Totally insane on its face.
Yeah.
Just incredible. Yeah. Have we been talking too much about music? Do we need to talk about movies now?
No. This can totally be a conversation about anything. But everyone who's... I remember talking to Sean Price Williams, and he said, every musician I know wants to be a director, and every director wants to be in a band. So I kind of think if you're...
That checks out.
Yeah, if you're into one, you're into the other kind of thing.
Yeah. I mean, I think I have an equal obsession with film as I do with music.
Yeah, I get so defensive when people say, oh, so you're a movie guy and a music guy. And I'm like, whoa. Back it the fuck up. It's completely mutual drive 50-50 obsession.
Yeah, I'm obsessed with whatever the thing is that I'm listening to or looking at the time. It might be a movie. It might be a record.
Yeah.
You know, whatever that is what I'm obsessed with.
And what was your favorite John Hughes movie?
Oh, God, that's really tough.
Wrote or directed? I think we can just to open it up.
I think I got to go Planes, Trains, Automobiles.
The saddest one of the... Yeah. I can't handle when John Candy gets ripped apart. That fucking kills... And the same with Uncle Buck. I fucking hate when they're mean to him, when the daughter's mean to him toward the end. It's like...
Yeah, Uncle Buck goes so hard. I mean, the week before Big John died, he came to my apartment. He lived north of Chicago. I was living in Chicago. He came over to my apartment, dropped a stack of DVDs and a stack of books on me. I gave him a stack of books. We would trade books.
Sick.
He'd say, listen, I want you to watch these films and I want you to read these books and let me know what you think. And I want to read something weird narrative, but I don't want it to be don't tell me a story. Like, what do you have? And I gave him a Jesse Ball book called The Disastrous Tale of Vera and Linus, which was like, I love this book so much. And you know, he was texting me after that, you know, it blew his mind or whatever. He loved it. But he died like a week later. But he was telling me, he's like, look, I've got this new cut of Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. It's done. It's on 35 mil. I want to do a screening of it. Like it's way sadder this time. This is the one that I really think is the definitive version of this film, and I want to show it to you, and I want to know what you think about this.
Yeah.
And I'm like, why do you care what I think? He's like, because you grew up with this. You know, this is a part of your childhood, and I want to know if I'm tinkering too much.
Right.
And I never got to see it because
oh man,
he died a week later in New York.
Fuck.
It's just so gutted.
Oh, that's terrible.
Yeah.
How weird would be the music that you were dropping on him? Would you give him like LP5 or something, or would he fuck with that?
Yeah, for sure.
Way.
I mean, yeah, he was intimately familiar with Autechre because of John primarily, but also like, so yeah, he would. I heard him listening to Oval once. That was really cool. He had his writing room at the house, and like he always had his old typewriter there, and he would have an ashtray with a cigarette burning in it. He wouldn't smoke it, but it would just be burning there. He just needed it. That was kind of like his hourglass. Right. That's how he that was his stick of time, if you will. He didn't
Was he a smoker?
Earlier, yes, but he'd quit
and just
years before.
Light it as like incense kind of thing? Or?
Yeah, he would light it, and that was a period of time for him. It was a 5-minute period or however long it took for him to get through whatever that cigarette was. He would light it and kind of just stick it there. The amount of weird music I heard him listening to in there, I mean, I can't even remember the type of stuff I turned him on to. I think his son, John, turned him on to way more stuff than I ever did. But I definitely gave him like, you know, I would give him like a Sakamoto record or, you know, or say, hey, did you ever listen to the score to this thing? Like, we bonded over Georges Delerue because I became obsessed with Godard as I got older. And the score to Contempt,
that's the one.
Was such a huge influence on me.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm, it's the one. And when I asked him about it, he was like, dude, I've worked with Georges Delerue. I was like, you're fucking kidding me. He's like, on Curly Sue, Georges Delerue did the score.
No way.
Yeah. I was like, damn, dude, Curly. I never saw Curly Sue. It was like a kid's movie.
I saw Curly Sue in the cinema. My brother took me to it. That's amazing.
Scored by Georges Delerue.
I didn't clock that at the time. I would have registered, but that's insane.
Yeah. Heavy. I couldn't believe it. Yeah. Anyway, that was like, you know, he and I had been talking about like he had been writing and ghostwriting under different names, a bunch of scripts. Mm-hmm. He really loved writing, I think was his favorite thing. But, you know, for the last year of his life or so, he would, you know, we'd hang out, me, John, and James and Big John, we'd go to lunch or whatever, or he'd come to my place and hang out. And he was saying, you know, I think I want to start directing again. You know, I kind of want to be behind the camera. I got the Arri out of storage. I found the lenses. I think I want to start directing again. You know, I don't know what it's going to be, but I just want to start shooting stuff and then maybe figure out later what I'm going to do with it. And it got cut short. I feel cheated because he was like, yeah, would you want to do the music for this? You know, I mean, I don't know if you'd be interested. I was like, man, are you crazy? Like, what are you talking about? Like, yes, I would 1000% love to do music for whatever it is that you're working on. Like, let's be real, man.
Who did the Breakfast Club score?
I don't remember. That's mostly electronic.
Yeah. It's the make of Ali Sheedy reveal. That audio cue is so incredible with that kind of
Yeah, I think he was like really into things like you know, Art of Noise and stuff like that. So that probably had a
that was such a great needle drop.
Some sort of it was a guy named Keith Forsey.
That track and the one where I don't know if it's a Billy Idol track. There's the one where John Bender's crawling through when he's in the ceiling.
Yeah.
That track is fucking sick. That's so cool.
Yeah, I don't remember what that was. It's funny because I watched it sort of passively recently. I kind of put it on as I was falling asleep. And I remember thinking like, oh wow, man, there's all these like big Linn drum machine beats and like the classic kind of clunky DX7 bass sample,
Yeah.
a bass patch that was just all over everything at the time, and sort of it was contemporary at the time. It was a very contemporary sound at the time.
Yeah, he had so many
And
good.
I remember also seeing it as a kid. I thought it was like so cool.
Yeah, I love all that weird music when
Coolest.
they're like falling asleep or just painfully bored and drifting off. All that incidental music is so fucking good. Let's end on talking about the Deeper Into Movies theme. We get DMs pretty much every time an episode goes live asking, what is this? Where can I listen to this? Occasionally, who is this guy?
We're going to have to do I guess I should at some point do like an extended version or whatever. Or
I don't know.
make it into-
A part of me thinks that, and a part of me just thinks, no, if you want to listen to it, you got to go to the pod. I think, I kind of think.
Well, that makes sense.
Because some people,
Yeah.
Or some people, they message like, is it, what film is this from? Or a lot of people think it's Thundercat for some reason. Everyone asks, is it Thunder?
Sorry to disappoint everybody.
No,
It's me, and the theme that everybody knows, the saxophone theme, is me writing a top line and chord changes for a guy named Charles Krasinski. Incredible saxophone player and also incredible tango composer and musician. He plays accordion demonically well. But I wrote this stuff with him in mind, and he sent it back a day later, and there it was. And then there's kind of variations of it. I did a version on the piano, but then we started thinking we needed to do a bigger version, didn't we?
Yeah. The full crazy story is I originally commissioned another composer to do the score. The composer sent me back a piece, and I was kind of like, it doesn't sound right. It doesn't sound right. And then I had to do the really embarrassing thing of email him back and say, can we try again? I mean, I'm like a little bit sadder, a little bit more dramatic, a little bit more like an old movie score. And then he sent me another one back, and I was like, this still isn't it. And then I played it to my girlfriend, and she was like, no, if you were doing a murder mystery podcast, this music would be right, but this isn't right for a movie talk. And then I hit you up in a frenzy, and it's like, can I just take 10 seconds of one of your songs and I was like, can I buy it off you? Can I use a 10-second snippet or whatever? And then you were like, one, why didn't you ask me first to do the score? And two, let me do something for you. I want to do a new piece. And I was like, I don't know. We were friends, but I didn't feel, I don't know, I could afford you, or you'd even be interested in doing something as, I know Peter does loads of different stuff all the time, so I thought he could be the guy, but I didn't think this would be, I thought it was beneath you to do do a pod. And
Nothing's beneath me. I am the musical janitor, man.
Okay. But then when he sent it back, I was so fucking nervous, and I was like, all right, I'm going to insult another genius here and be like, this ain't it. But then because I played it in front of my girlfriend, because I'm sure like your lady, she just tells it to you straight, or it's almost, I was talking about if you're trying on a new jacket, like, can I pull this off? And if you see the face,
you see the sort of the mouth goes into a perfectly straight line, and kind of
it's like, all right,
the gaze narrows a little bit. No,
I'll put this back on the shelf. Yeah. So I was waiting for that.
Yeah.
And then from the opening note, she was like, and I was like, all right, we fucking got it. And yeah. And because
I'm glad.
Because I was so gun shy about starting the pod. I said I wanted to do it. I got all the equipment. And then I sat around in the pandemic for about 4 months before I had the courage to even try a pod. But when I had your music, I was like, I've got the fucking superhero theme music now. I kind of said I got the tone of I got the tone of the pod in my head, and I was like, I need to release something anyway, just to humble brag about this score. And then to set you back up, then yeah, you rang me saying you were... What were you originally going to do? You were going to fly out for...
Well, Brian Senti, the BAFTA award-winning composer and good buddy of mine, who I think is low-key one of the most genius composers alive in the world today, he had a session with the Czech National Symphony Orchestra, and he called me up and he says, look, man, I'm not going to use all this time. Do you want the last hour? It's a shame to book time with 50 players and then not use it all. So, yes, please, let me have this hour. And so I wrote a couple of things to try out for my own stuff. Jury's still out on that, but I had plenty of time to do a new version of the Deeper Into Movies theme with a huge orchestra in this incredible room with world-class engineers. And it seemed crazy not to do it because it's such a short piece of music. And then I wrote 2 little interstitial pieces that maybe you'll use them. I don't know if you'll use them or not, but those can serve as a sort of changeover in the middle of the podcast or whatever. And it was actually really easy to do with them. These players can sight read anything, and for me, they're sight reading very easy stuff. And then I had the idea to get Mary Lattimore to play harp on it to kind of dress it up a little bit, also just to kind of give it a little more of the kind of really vintage movie magic, the stuff that I love from when I was a kid. And she did exactly that. We literally recorded the harp in her, in her living room. I have, people can see pictures. We'll post all that stuff. But she's great. I love working with Mary. It's the first time I'd ever really worked with her. We'd played shows together and stuff. And, as a human, immaculate vibes. But it's the first time I ever got to record her. So that was really exciting for me. And then there we are. So we've got the Czech National Symphony Orchestra playing the Deeper Into Movies theme.
Incredible. That's wild. I was at the cinema when I got your text and it's just like, it's locked. And I was like, oh my fucking God, it's in the can. That was incredible.
Yeah. It's one of those things, man. Like I can't really explain this well. I'll do my best to explain it quickly and briefly. But conducting an orchestra is better than playing any instrument you could ever hope to play. I mean, it's the feeling of like, imagine the small little feeling of moving forward that you get when you get onto a moving walkway in an airport and you all of a sudden feel like you're hauling ass. Imagine that times about 10,000, where you feel like you move your hand just the tiniest little bit and this gigantic sound comes out of it. I can't describe. It's incredible. Driving a Ferrari must feel like that, I guess. I wouldn't know, but.
What's your approach to conducting? Is it like a giant theremin kind of vibe, or?
No, I mean, you have to sort of beat time for them, but you also have to kind of move in a way that makes sense for the music so that people aren't. So, if you're moving your hand in a very stiff way, the players tend to kind of interpret that as play a little more marcato. They will play whatever's on the page, of course, but you're guiding them. You're giving an introduction when a certain section needs to come in. You kind of give them you gesture to them to kind of let them know, like, hey, now's the time. You give them a little bit of a heads up. And then...
How much practice does that take? Because obviously I'm guessing the eyes are on the sheet, but also they're in your sight line as well, or... I couldn't speak from the position of a player. But for me, I'm, looking down to make sure I'm not getting lost, and then looking up and making eye contact with section leads and players in the back and stuff to let them, to kind of keep everybody connected. The eye contact thing is really important. Right hand is sort of showing them where we are in the beat, and the left hand is kind of giving them an idea of dynamics, like play louder, play softer, we're decrescendo, we're crescendo here, giving them dynamics, entrance, stop, all that kind of stuff. And then depending on the piece, sometimes I'll use a baton or whatever. If it's a little bit more of a kind of andante or kind of like a slightly higher tempo, if it's a little more quick and a little more direct, I might use a baton because it's maybe a little easier to see in some circumstances.
If it's slower and more lyrical, I like to just use my hands, though.
This has been good, man. We've got some fucking big boy stories on this pod.
Cool. Thanks, man. Thanks for
Yeah.
having me. I appreciate it.
This
I thought
has
we were
been-
going to do like a 5-minute talk about just, how cool it was to go to Prague and do that thing in March. But no, I appreciate you having me on. I love the podcast. You know that. I mean, I listen to it.
Yeah, and I'm a stan for you, so it's just total mutual appreciation.
That's mutual.
Boom. That was me and Joshua Eustis. Just two friends talking about music and movies. Okay, that's it from me. Thanks to the man himself, Joshua Eustis, aka Telefon Tel Aviv, for my beautiful music. Thanks to you guys for listening. And as always, if you enjoy the pod, click like and subscribe. That really helps to get the pod out there. And as I always say, the pod will always be free. All episodes available. So let's keep it that way. Thank you, and I'll speak soon.